Namaste, viewers, and welcome to Poetry Lab with Dr. Pariksith Singh. We are privileged to have the poet in person, and we will be speaking about his collection of poems, Satya-Poems to My Father. Viewers, you've seen the last few poems have been about various animals, peacocks, owls, swans, and so forth. But today we are going to encounter a very special creature, the King Cobra, no less. And for those who are inclined towards poetry, towards language, whether it's Vak or Paravak, here's a question for you. When you listen to the poem, I want you to tell me or think what the symbol of the King Cobra is. Okay, can you do that? And then maybe Dr. Singh will help us out. But go ahead, Dr. Singh, page 53, King Cobra.
King Cobra. It stood motionless without a hiss, barely a foot away from my face, and swayed gently to the twinkling of the stars, its tongue flickering for a brief kiss. But imprinted on my brain even now are his eyes without lids that stared blank without will. We both knew the inevitable. Gazing beyond each other's sight, in a strange unity we contemplated. The hood flared in response and dare to the rhythms of a mechanical heartbeat. As you tossed and turned, I implored, finally, now be still, Father, rest. As if on cue, the cardiac impulses grew erratic and flatlined into blank tracing. Only the inhuman blare and beep and the flash of luminous screen, the wail of dropping oxygen in pitch, and the music of Om Namo Bhagavate. The pulse slipped away from underneath my fingertips. It slithered into the dark hole. Its tail disappeared into the bottomless pit. I glared at the red blip of the eye from the dead as its venom surged and stung in the middle of my eyes. But for a flash, as it slithered through, another figure rose from its coil. And with your last and first baby's breath, a golden lightning zigzagged to the sky.
Wow, kya baat hai. So the cobra becomes a line on the screen that monitors, the heartbeat, and then it becomes a streak of lightning across the sky. But so viewers, did you catch any of it? And, as a critic as well as an admirer of good poetry, you have to look at all the verbal and other cues and the structure of the poem. Hiss, kiss. Did you see the rhymes? Sometimes the rhymes are at the end of the line, sometimes they're in the middle, lids, and then sometime below, sight, contemplated, beat. So we have to remember that the rhymes don't have to be perfect in poetry. They can be half rhymes, they can be suggestions. And in fact, see, as I said, pit, look at the word pit, and somewhere sight, pit. So see how the sounds are pitch and then pit, fingertip. So see the sounds, blip, how they function. But, we can't go into it in great depth, but because, we'll have to really unpack it line by line. At least we're doing poem by poem, so be happy with that for the time being. So back to you. I mean, were you conscious of this? The stare of the cobra, the threat, and then how the cobra becomes, the charts, and then it becomes a streak of lightning. I mean, I was struck by how, the image gets metamorphosed, through the poem.
It felt like it. I didn't see. Obviously, it was not a physical perception, but it was some very strong image that was pressing on the mind. Here, he's tightly coiled up and in a very dangerous situation between life and death, and almost this hooded creature is looking at you right in the face, and right at the point where you're about to lose everything, there is freedom, there is release, not the end, but the first baby's breath with the last breath. It was the snake is, of course, a creature, mythological creature that is very powerful in our Indian mythology, also in the Western mythology, and it has been something that I'm acutely aware of because living in Florida, as you're aware, I'm a city boy. I don't do snakes, even though psychologically and abstract. But when I see a snake, something inside just goes into a reacts immediately, and then you have to be still and let it relax. So it's just a response. But this was almost like a gestalt where there was the whole image of a very powerful, coiled being gazing at you and threatening to take away everything. But in that very threat is the release. At least that's how it seems to me now. It was a very intense moment, and I guess some of that intensity has come out in that creature.
Yes, totally. In fact, in some of the earlier poems as well, that moment of release is when actually the son is telling the father, rest now, go, don't struggle anymore. So we see that happening here as well, where the speaker says, now be still, father, rest. And then the line, it's almost flatlining, that erratic, whatever those green, how they dance like a cobra in some sense, the hood sways. But I'm also sort of conscious, you said the imagery of the cobra, kundalini. Kunda actually means coiled. So kundalini, and Shiva, of course, has a cobra, and so the cobra is a very powerful symbol. We don't always look at the snake in a negative way in India, as you know. It's not the serpent who tempts Eve to eat the forbidden apple. For us, the fruit of the tree of knowledge actually is liberating in a different sense, with no disrespect to any other mythological or traditions of narrative. No, none of that is intended. But so you're right, it's a trans-civilizational symbol, and it links to the dragon as well. And it's always a creature that fascinates us as much as it makes us, as much as it terrifies us, as much as it makes us afraid. So here, you're staring into the still eyes of the snake. You mentioned, Snake Country, Florida. We just had a black racer the other day. Thanks to you, I'm not afraid of that creature anymore. It's a friendly snake, I think, and it slithers away, and you don't mess with it in any case. But most snakes are harmless, I might say, but some can be very deadly, like the King Cobra. So what I'm trying to say is it's a metaphor of both death, that finality, but also of some possibilities of awakening, if I may put it like that. And the poem has that. But, the slithering of the snake in the dark hole, it's like, it's over. It's over. The snake has bitten, its victim. The poison is gone and it's over. But then if you look at the last lines, uh, I, I glared at the red blip once again. See the blip, the eye of the snake and the blip on the screen. So you can see, viewers, how the metaphors are functioning, okay? Of the eye from the dead as its venom surged and stung in the middle of my eyes. It's like tears. You're tearing up. You see your loved one go, and the snake has stung. You can see that moment, life is exiting. And then the last very strong stanza, in my view, but for a flash as it slithered through, another figure rose from its coil, and with your last and first baby breath. So our last breath is also our first breath, you know. In my end is my beginning, as T.S. Eliot famously says. A golden lightning zigzagged to the sky. Now, we always believe, again, in our tradition, that when a great soul passes, it's a cosmic event, okay? It's not just a personal event. And I myself, by the way, have experienced it a couple of times, and it's been recorded as well. And even if it's imagined, the snake has now, you know, it's like a lightning, it's slithered across the sky. So, any final comments on this poem, sir?
Um, no, I think I'm as I'm reading these poems, thanks to you, I see a subtle but a very powerful influence of Rilke. I don't know if you remember Rainer Maria Rilke. Yes, not directly, but if you see his animal poems, that's where, if you remember the panther, I think, and the flamingos, he had a few creatures. He loved. He was a very strong symbolist. Some of his famous, I think, the panther was probably one of his most famous. So I see that darkness that is coiled, and then suddenly at the end there is some release, or if you remember the Apollo, the famous poem on Apollo's torso. So he would take an image and just stay with it, and that's it. It would not. There would be no uh, meaning ascribed outside the image. The image was everything. The symbol was everything. Everything came out from that and went inside that. And I think he was, at least a brief while, an admirer of Mallarmé. So,
I
so
was just going
Mallarmé
to say
and
that,
Rilke, I
that's
think,
why we call this the
bounce
poetry
back
lab.
and through the
Because,
subconscious,
we've talked about Blake. Last
and
time we talked
technique.
about Mallarmé, the Swan poems, the Cygnus poems, and now Rilke, a great German poet, again a symbolist poet. So, symbolism, going back to the Vedas and then being revived by a variety of very, very important modernist poets, including, Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot, and some poets before that in the English tradition, and then the European tradition. And it also goes into cinema because the earliest cinematic experiments were also about symbols. There's Dali, who's trying to, capture some symbols from the unconscious. Jung. So you can see so many things playing. That's what poetry is, isn't it? It's awash with all of these influences. Now, frankly, if you had not mentioned Rilke, I wouldn't have picked it up. So I myself will have to go back. Mallarmé I knew because of the swans, He has such a famous poem.
But if you remember the panther and
Panther. That's why. See, I was going to ask you last time whether the Blakean tiger was the only influence on the tiger poem, or was there Rilke? So I could have connected it with that, but not with the King Cobra. I don't think that Rilke had any experience of cobras, but I think many of us in India, at least, I mean, when I was growing up, I have seen a number of cobras. And it's just as an aside, when I was at Sadhguru's ashram, in the guest house that we were staying, there was a cobra right there, and he actually picked it up. I saw him doing that, and he's very friendly with cobras apparently. So it's still a living art. How to whatever. I don't want to say deal with snakes, but you know coexist with them. They're fascinating creatures, and as I said, we had a very recent experience of the black racer. And I mean, if you keep your distance, show them respect, they'll be on their way. I mean, I don't know if we can say that about death, Dr. Singh. If we keep our distance, it'll be on its way. We don't know. But on that note, thank you, viewers. Please join us soon. in our next episode of the Poetry Lab with Dr. Pariksith Singh. And do like, share, and subscribe to our channel and pass the word around. And who knows, one day maybe we'll pick up one of your volumes of poems to discuss. With those words, thank you, viewers, and namaste.
Thank you.